I'm really quite happy to tell you, you're getting a 1. Does not meet expectations on your performance review. Or maybe, bless your heart, you're just not cutting it, Puddin', so I'm going to give you a 1.
What are you doing?
Allie, I'm just working on my accents as a way to improve my communication in the workplace.
By changing your accent?
Yeah, I'm an innovator. Try to keep up, would you?
Welcome to the Career Corrective, your career lifeline that gives you laugh lines with Jenny and Allie.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we are talking about how to perfect the British accent.
Yes. It's a whole episode on it.
I think, I'm not sure about this because I don't really know what it's supposed to sound like, but I think Renee Zellweger as Bridget Jones did a pretty good job.
Yeah. You know who else did a really good job? Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire.
What's the first name?
Euphegenia.
What's that line you always do from Mrs. Doubtfire?
With the run by fruiting?
No.
A few light slams.
Yeah, that one. And something about on my way.
I quote that movie way too much.
I don't know why we didn't think about that for the opening.
I know. Help is on the way.
Help is on the way. That's what it is.
I actually, one of the managers reach out because he needed help with something, and his email to me was, help. It just said help. Responded back with the help is on the way.
Maybe we're talking about travel. The accents you were doing were all to do with where we're going to talk about travel tips.
Another great topic.
Actually, we are going to talk about travel in an upcoming episode, and it's going to be so fun. There is a friend of the show who is a travel. When I tell you she's an expert, I mean, she finds the deals of the century. She has all the hacks, everything you could imagine to do with getting away, which is so important to balance out your career stress. But that's not today. Today, we're talking about, I'm going to say this is another Swiss Army knife, kind of like I feel about emotional intelligence at work. This will give you influence. This will give you pull. This will make you more adaptable. It'll help you grow in your career. It's the power of effective communication.
Ooh, let's effectively communicate. Effective communication, shall we?
I would love to.
Okay. First, we're going to talk through this article I found from the Harvard Professional Development called 8 Ways You Can Improve Your Communication Skills. It's your guide to establishing better communication habits for success in the workplace. The first one is be clear and concise. The secret to powerful, persuasive communication, whether written or spoken, is clarity and, when possible, brevity. Every word should serve a purpose. Mm-hmm. Allie, what are some tips for our listeners on how they can achieve this?
At work, I'm always working backwards, thinking backwards.
Ooh, okay.
Before I write an email, or this is more in thinking of you're preparing for a conversation. I don't think of everything this detailed for chit chat, of course. But if you just think about what your goal is in the communication, what am I going for? Do I want to raise? Do I want to advocate for something in my world? Do I want to change a process? Do I want someone to collaborate with me differently? Am I talking to my boss? So you think about what is your goal and who is your audience. And I know that's pretty obvious, but I think the little trick that's worked really well for me is I think about that and then I craft what I'm going for, be written from their perspective. I put as much in the communication that makes it about them as possible. And in my mind, that's generosity in communication. You still bake your point in there, but you're putting it in a way that a person is much more incentivized to listen, and not only listen, to think about going along with what you want, basically. They say be clear and concise, but you want to make it as crafted toward them as possible. In keeping it brief, which ironically this answer is not, so don't do it this way. But in keeping it brief, think about layers of an onion. They can always follow up. So give them the top layer of the onion, just enough to get your point across, and then the communication can flow there. But if you get too wordy, then think about what needs to be conveyed in that message to start it off.
Right. So it's a little bit of emotional intelligence you're going to need here.
Ah, yes. That is right. Yes. I love that.
Yeah, I like to start my emails with a, hey, listen up. That's what I like to do. That really grabs them. And I feel like it's very effective.
Little icon of a megaphone.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to tell you some important information right now, so don't blow me off. So that's just a helpful tip for our listeners.
Listeners, we're going to send you emails. And we're going to start them with, this is important, so don't blow me off.
If you do, that's on you.
Your loss. Let's get into an argument before we even, it's not even an interaction. Let's just be argumentative.
Right. It's already hostile.
Fine. Don't read this email.
And then I follow up with a second email. Clearly you weren't listening.
Not effectively, anyway.
Not effective. Come on.
I was thinking of that 30 Rock episode where Tina Fey's character is trying to get approved for an apartment and she has wine and she keeps calling the co-op board. I remember her in one of them. Listen, co-op board.
She's having a fight with herself.
Yeah, she was convinced they weren't going to choose her. So she just keeps leaving voicemails.
Yes. Oh my God. That was so hard to watch. Oh, we have an Ask CC, Allie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we do. This is from Ryan. She writes us, I try to be direct and concise at work in my messaging, but I keep getting feedback that I'm too wordy in presentations, emails, and in meetings. I just want to make sure I'm providing context and giving enough information. What can I do to change this?
I think this is really, and everybody talks about this now, but in thinking of attention spans, social media has ruined all of us.
Agreed. Agreed.
And I touched on part of this before, but thinking about the onion, the way to really, so I'll dive into those steps now.
Okay.
You start with, your goal and your audience, and then get everything organized with what you want to say, and then rank that information in order of importance. And then think of sharing the information a layer at a time. Now, if this is a presentation, you can go through and organize everything, but then go back through and say, where can I cut? Almost like your own editing process. But also think about, I can always save some of this, and it can be used for maybe some follow-up meetings, follow-up conversations. And remember that part of the communication is on the audience, the intended recipient. They can always ask questions and you can make it more of a conversation. the information you have on the topic doesn't need to be shared out of the gate. You probably are doing a great job of communicating, and your message is probably very thorough, well thought out. And I would say that if that's the case, which it sounds like it is, Ryan, take some of what your messaging is, some of your content, and save it for the things that I'm describing here. And I think you'll find better interactions from just reorganizing your information and using it a little bit differently.
Right. Or you could just put it all in there and then that's it. You just cut the communication right off. You got it all in there.
Back
you
to
don't
the
need
hostility. That's
right.
That's a one-trick pony, but a pony's never going to let you down.
There's nothing more to discuss. It was in my first email. I'm just going to respond with a heart emoji. Just cut it right off. That's what I like to do.
Maybe make an avatar of yourself with your arms folded like a pouty teenager.
That's a great idea. Just send that response?
Yes.
Yeah. No words. Yeah. Okay. The second one was to prepare ahead of time. Consider the full conversation from start to finish. Do your homework. Research the facts, stats, examples that strengthen your points. Expect the unexpected. Ooh, I always expect the unexpected. I do. Anticipate tough questions, criticisms, or counter arguments. Plan your responses. Being ready helps you stay confident and composed. So, how can our listeners think about using all these tips and tools in a realistic way?
Yeah, so obviously this article is written for the Harvard continuing education. It's for executives and people at work, and I think they do a really good job of making it clear. I love discussing these articles because I think what you're asking me brings it to life for people.
Yeah.
If you are using this at work, you're thinking of your performance review. You're thinking of negotiating salaries. You're thinking about conversations you really don't want to have. Otherwise, you wouldn't need help with them.
Right? Exactly.
When they talk about do your homework in a performance review, that would be, I think we've talked about this on prior episodes, but it's keeping examples of your accolades that you've received, even positive emails, feedback. You want to keep that list and that folder going all year through so that when you get to your performance review, there's your concrete examples to support what you're saying. That would also be relevant to your salary negotiations. You always want to be able to back up what you're saying. And then when they talk about expect the unexpected, we all know that we feel like the performance review process. Well, if any of you don't feel the performance review process is unfair, definitely write to us because I've never heard anyone say it's
know.
fair.
No, please write to us.
Yeah, let us know. Where do you work? All of our listeners will want to go there.
Yeah.
The performance review process isn't broken. Sign me up.
Right?
In that conversation, expect the unexpected is, well, it's not really unexpected, but some people forget from one year to the next, but it's going to be, well, we changed the way that the bonus is this year, so you're getting actually less than the percentage we thought. And then they do this complicated math. So you can.
know. I don't need to know the math. I'm not even following. Sorry.
Right.
Just tell me what. Give it to me straight.
Yeah. Thinking of those conversations, it would be preparing. Here are the things that I've contributed. So to prepare for the bonuses not playing out in the way we thought they would, how can we raise my salary? You're finding ways to prepare for the nonsense you're going to hear in that situation. And in preparation for that, have ways to steer the conversation in a way that benefits you. And then for difficult conversations, when you're dealing with stakeholders and the stakeholders potentially unhappy, doesn't even have to be anything to do with what was in your control, but those are going to be stressful. Think about the conversation from their perspective, because then you're going to get the objections and then you can prepare what you're going to say to overcome those objections, because you're going to come out of that conversation, even if it takes follow-ups like we were talking about before, then you're going to move the needle a lot farther in that first conversation to set you up for a better follow-up conversation and then a better overall end result.
Yes, very helpful. Okay, the next one is be mindful of nonverbal communication. Facial expressions, gestures, and body language can carry up to 93% more impact than the spoken word. When words and nonverbal cues don't match, people tend to trust what they see over what they hear. What if you're doing review over the phone and you can't even see your boss?
Probably going to benefit you because they won't see your reaction to what they're saying.
They won't be able to see your jaw on the floor. So that's good.
Or your eye roll.
Yeah.
You're making a good point, though, in thinking about the communication situation. If you're on the phone, you don't have to think of your nonverbals. You're relying only on what's happening verbally.
Yes. So you could be like, oh my God, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. No, my bonus was cut in half. That's fine. I don't need it. Not in this climate. I mean, everything's going great in the world. So, like, who needs that extra money? No, thank you so much. Right?
I think your comedy really speaks to the actual pain that people feel. And it's so clear that you've been through it. But this is what it feels like to be in these situations where you're thinking afterward, what in the world just happened to me? I mean, is this real?
Absolutely. It's so frustrating because you're the one living it. And when you get these reviews, you're looking back at all the things, the past year, all the things that you've had to deal with. And it's like, they have no idea. They have no clue, which I get that, because how would they? But if you're communicating effectively with them throughout the year of all these things that you're discussing, they should have some idea of all the effort that you're putting in. It's devastating. It's just, okay.
It's really a game, and it makes me realize sincerely that we need to do a full episode on how to nail your performance review. I think there's a lot of tips and hacks and tricks and perspective that would be helpful for our listeners. Definitely going to bring that one to life. But for this one, in thinking about nonverbal communication, which we started that conversation 6 hours ago from this article, it really empowers you in a couple of different ways. It can help you with receiving messages. If you're looking at others' nonverbals, you can really get into kind of their poker face can be revealed. You can see maybe they're hesitating a little bit. They're more reserved. They're sitting back. Maybe they're frustrated, which you can tell by their brow or their resting bitch face. Or
I can't believe you said that.
It's what it is. It
Yes.
is what it is. Or they're looking at their phone.
Rude.
Or you can tell if someone is really stiff in their posture. It can mean they're really tense about the conversation, and that could be time when you use all the other things we talked about, which is do your homework, prepare, because this will help you read them to know kind of what's coming. It's going to help you tune in to more of what is really going on in the communication interaction rather than just listening to their verbals. And you can also tell by other pieces like their tone and their things like that. But I think nonverbals are a great way once you start to look at them and utilize them. It's almost like a game. For an example, because I know Jenny loves examples and I don't blame her.
I do.
Give an example. Boss looks disengaged or frustrated or anything of the negative varietal while you're advocating for yourself, and you're looking at that happen, unfold in front of your eyes. You can try and address what you think that may be over. Taking it a step farther, if you're asking for a raise and you're laying out why you deserve the raise and they're looking categorically negative, you can pause advocating for yourself and address it to say, prepared a lot of great info to have this discussion. This may not be the best time, or I'd love to hear what your thoughts are before we continue. Flip it back on them.
Yes.
And tell them what you're observing. Call it out in a really professional way. But if you keep talking with your original message, not reading someone's nonverbals, you're really wasting that communication and that data. So you have to clear that out before progressing. That's what I've found to be. I've had success with that. And that goes back to my point earlier, making it about them. I was in a performance review with, I have two examples of this.
Okay.
I was in a performance review with a terrible boss.
Yeah.
And this happened where I read her nonverbal and I called it out, and she said, I know how hard you worked. It's just my hands are tied with the team. The discretionary bonus, I'm giving it to you.
Oh my gosh.
So, and that's not me saying, look how great. It was still very stressful because I think I did work really hard, but I just think that was not a good management move on her part. But the reason that she did that is because I did her work. The reason it benefited me is that gave me a really clear sign of, I definitely do not want to work for this person anymore. It was not a place I wanted to be. If I'm getting other people's pieces of the discretionary bonus and that's her way of leading, that was my official. But I got that revelation out of her because of reading the room and catching her off guard. I don't really think she meant to share that.
No, she just knew that you were going to not be happy.
Yes. So it was.
And she wanted to keep you.
Yes. And it did the opposite.
Right. Because you've got integrity, girl.
Yeah. Well, it didn't really matter because she ended up getting fired. I was looking and I was leaving, but then she just went first. So it made it easier for me. But there was no way I was staying working for the universe took care of that one. So that was a win. Thinking about nonverbal communication. The other way it can help you, in my experience, is it guides you what you want to be communicating.
Yes.
If you're saying something that is positive and you really want to reinforce it, you just want to be aware of, am I smiling? Am I looking warm? These are kind of basic things, but just talking about what the article said, if your posture is closed off and you're communicating something welcoming and warm, you create a feeling of distrust. So you don't want to inadvertently do that to yourself.
Right. Yeah. I always like to go into these with a positive attitude, and I try not to let their gestures or actions throw me off. And then that kind of just lightens the mood.
Meanwhile, their verbals are like, Jenny, you are the problem. The report you were supposed to get in wasn't there on time. That's nothing to do with why they're upset, even though that's what they said.
I don't trust it and I'm like, it's just Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire talking.
It's like Stacy from Wayne's World, like, you need a gun rack. That's going to fix this.
Stacy, we broke up months ago.
I don't even own a gun.
The next one, mastering tone in speech. A single word can shift the mood, so choose wisely. A poorly chosen word fuels tension. Be aware of your volume, projection, or intonation. A strong yet calm voice conveys authority, while a raised or shaky tone can signal frustration. Stay mindful in real time. If a conversation is veering off course, Adjust your tone to keep things constructive. So we actually talked about this in our emotional intelligence episode.
Yeah.
I think you guys should check that out.
Yes.
Keep that one on replay, right? I think we could do some follow-ups on this to dive in deeper because it's very challenging in the heat of the moment. Allie, do you have anything to share for our listeners on this that could help them?
Yeah, I think that getting away and literally taking a break anytime it's possible. There's interrupting the situation if it's going to a tense place.
Yeah.
Think about this at work. If
Okay.
you're tense, it's because someone else is behaving in a way that is not jibing with what works for you. So there's a million different ways that could manifest, but you don't always have to be overt you don't have to call it out. You don't if they're not being honest with you or they're not being above board with you, then you have to take care of yourself. And I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who's not being the jerk. Like if you're the jerk in the situation, this message is not for you. But
right.
When you're empathetic and you are like our anxious achievers and like ourselves in these situations, you're usually the person that's on the receiving end of some sort of negative behavior. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from. But I've done this myself. I will say, excuse me, just need a quick break, get a drink of water, whatever you can when possible to give yourself some space. And if that's not possible, then you just want what's worked for me is to hyper focus on this does not need to be solved today. This does not need to be solved this moment. Just thinking about bringing myself back to the perspective of this seems really important right now. Anytime you're in a tense situation, it feels so, so, so important.
Right.
But after you give yourself a chance to cool down, was it really that important? And if it is, it will be there later. I think anytime you can pause the conversation or delay, if none of that is possible, if it needs to be resolved, then you just want to think of not now, just lighten it up as much as possible, thinking of solving enough to make your point, but not going for broke in those situations, because 9.99999 times out of 10, you need time to process. So if you can't have that time to process, then just bring it to the lowest common denominator and keep it as civil as possible. It's just under that umbrella of it's not worth it to behave in a way that's going to make you regret it later.
Right. Yeah. What I like to do when things get tense, I like to create a diversion and put it back on them. That buys me time, gives me time to cool down, and makes them look like they're the problem.
Like a good old gaslighting.
A good old fashioned gaslight.
That's solid.
Right?
Yes, I love it.
Yeah. And then Jan's like,
when I'm having a tense moment with the cast of the Brady Bunch, Marsha, you are always the problem. And Jan's like, finally, someone is calling this out. Let's reboot the Brady Bunch, but we'll make Jenny the maid, and she gaslights the whole family.
That would be amazing. Next, we have practice active listening. According to communication expert Marjorie North, even when we think we're listening, our minds are often racing with distractions, judgments, or what we want to say next. Yeah, like that's me. Active listening isn't just about hearing words, it's about truly understanding the message. Allie, what are your tips for this one?
Oh, I wasn't listening. What?
Oh my gosh. What a hoot.
It's really difficult. I think active listening actually helps you. It gives your mind something to go toward, really saying to yourself, do I have space for this conversation or not? And if I'm having the conversation, then be in the conversation. You're not interrupting. You're letting go of what else is going on. Think about the basics. Make eye contact. Don't interrupt. Let them know through your body language, like we were just talking about. And then if you really want to show that you're being an active listener, encourage the conversation to go deeper. But really, this is only if you have time for that. You could ask open-ended questions. Can you tell me more about that? Things like that will make the person really feel that you're interested because you're inviting them to dive deeper. But I would say only do that if you're really there for whatever the follow-up is. If not, I would just say, paraphrasing, you could say something like, this is really interesting. What I'm hearing from you is A, B, and C. Is that what you're conveying here? It wraps up the conversation, but it lets them know that you are really engaged.
Right. What if you're in a scenario where you actually can't get a word in? They're just going on and on and on, and it's supposed to be about you, but it's really them talking the entire time, and you can't ever get a word in. Would you politely interrupt them? Or would you just say, hey, can you shut up so I can have some input here?
If you want to take the aggression track, that's an option. What I do in those scenarios, I use my softening phrase opener. I would just say, that's interesting. I'd love to add to that. Or, this is great input. Let me give you a different perspective. Or, before we move on, I'd love to share my thoughts on this. It's just that whatever feels right to you. But what I do in those situations is I start with something that catches their attention, and then I just acknowledge what they said and then let them know, oh, hey, I'm also here. I'm going to speak.
Right. Zip it.
Or that.
Okay. All right. Let's get into a real life situation. Let's say someone is doing this in front of their boss, and which makes you even more anxious.
Yeah.
How would you handle that?
Get your word in, like we just talked about, and then redirect the conversation so you can bring it back to the group. If it's the three of you, the boss, this other person, and you, or there's a group of people, you bring it back to the more general conversation. And again, acknowledge what they said. That's a great insight. I'd love to hear what others think as well. That's a great insight. I'd love to share what I think as well. Or you could say, build on that. I have some data that supports another angle. It's just shifting that attention back from just them, but you're using them going on and on and on as a way to do that.
Ooh, okay. I like that a lot.
And then if the boss is there and they're showing off or they're making it about them because of that, you can strategically use that and say something like, that's a great observation. To add to that, my experience, my data shows I agree with some of that, but I have a slightly different take based on A, B, C. Just again, that move of acknowledging them first. You're not then doing the same thing that they're doing, and then they're thinking, oh, they're talking about what I just said, but it's a way to get the conversation back to you so you can actually participate. And then that's a really good way to do that in front of the boss. And if it's appropriate, if you're being cut off, you can talk directly to the boss. This is if it's really severe. You could wait for them to breathe and then speak directly to the boss. Like, I'd like to quickly share my perspective before we move on, and then just roll right into it. They can always tell you not now. Talking directly to the boss will make sure they hear you without making it seem like a power struggle. And I would say that that move would be appropriate for those more severe situations. I'm looking at this as tiers of how bad this is actually happening.
Right.
And I actually did have this happen to me. I worked with this person. He was for making things about him. And I love when people love attention because it takes the attention off me, but it began to interfere with what I had to share. It was group meetings. It was with our boss. It was every which thing. He would take it over. So you could say the word postal worker, and he would jump into a story about how it would be the most unbelievable thing about how his postal worker comes in for coffee every day. Like, I don't even.
Nobody cares.
Every topic. And so I called it out in a meeting tactfully.
You did. Okay. What did you say?
I said, well, I won't say his name, but I just said, these are great points. If you can bear with me, I'm going to share my perspective now. And so that's all it took, because he had no self-awareness, clearly, but he knew not to mess with me after that. And I think this has happened to me a couple of times where it felt to me at the time, I have to be rude. That's what I was thinking of. I was overly polite in a lot of my communication at that time. And I thought anything direct meant I was being rude. But as I was learning these things and how to navigate all of this, I thought, I have really no other choice. I started to tell myself, well, if that's rude, then that's okay. And it wasn't rude at all. It was advocating for myself.
He's being rude.
Yes. Well, I always thought, well, that's fair. Everyone else can be rude.
Right, exactly.
But he got it. And I found that a few times in my doing this kind of thing, where if the person is really the biggest offender of being not aware, once you do call them out, they focus in on that and they don't want that to happen.
Right.
That's not going to be in every case, because I've also had it where people are really big offenders of this and they just don't get it. So they let me speak when I call it out, but I had to continually do that throughout the relationship. So it has gone both ways, but I just use the same move. When it's really that unbalanced, I will say something like, whatever it is, the same move, acknowledge whatever they're saying. And if I need to, I will overtly say in a direct way, I'm going to talk now. And then I will go into what I have to say. And that's always been successful when the situation is severe.
I usually just give an eye roll to the person who's next to me and just get a load of this person. Like, holy smokes. Are they going to zip it or?
And I love how you're expanding it. We went from aggression to passive aggression.
Oh, it's totally passive aggressive.
Just use it's
the best. It's the healthiest way, I feel. Yeah. You can do so much with an eye roll,
Absolutely. Well, this conversation will definitely continue next episode. We have some more things to share about communication in the workplace, and I can't wait to see what Jenny suggests next week to keep you all on your toes. But in the meantime, we always love to send you off with nuggets that we think can help you throughout your week. And we have talked about this a little bit this episode, but 2 little things I think can be really helpful in thinking about your communication and making it as effective as possible is being empathetic and generous in communication. I mentioned it before when I said making it all about the other person. It's not that you're looking to be a pushover or anything like that, but when you're genuine and you're empathetic and generous in your communication, you're going to build trust and you're going to strengthen relationships and you're going to create more productive conversations because people are going to feel heard. You're going to make things as positive as possible and people will be trusting and open with you. This is definitely my natural personality, but it is why thought over the years to do what Jenny and I are doing right now, because as someone who built trust with people, because I do genuinely care about people, and any tip that I've always learned, I've always wanted to share and kind of built that reputation with my colleagues. But people, it extended beyond that, where I will be the person on public transportation and a stranger will tell me all about their life. And
yes, that happens to me as well.
yeah. Yeah, we are both just natural helpers. And well, Jenny's comedy was not examples of that.
No,
but
I don't really do that.
She's just kidding, you
She's
guys.
just joking.
It makes me want to show up for the podcast when she brings the humor, so I am here for it. For real.
Just remember, listeners, they're always Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire talking. That's a great way to wrap it up.
Yes. We hope that this was helpful today.
Yes.
And you feel good about your communicating, your nonverbals, your verbals, and make it as positive but true to yourself as possible. And I think that especially right now in our current climate, that we can all use a little bit of positivity. And again, not being a pushover, not getting steamrolled, but making it as generous and empathetic as possible. But on the other hand, you hold your ground because you're amazing.
That's right. That's right.
And we don't want anyone to mess with you. And if they do, you write to us.
Please write to us.
We will
That's
help
what we're
you.
here for.
That's
we're here for you.
We are here for you. And we'll continue next week with more communication hacks and comedy and silliness. And we hope you join us. But in the meantime, have a great week.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.